Welcome back to another episode of Hey, it's Arlesha. This season, I am using this space to share more on my life anthem right now. What is that, you ask? It's called Harmonized Ambition. Today, I want to dig into something that sits right at the foundation of what I mean when I talk about harmonizing ambition. It's about creating capacity and understanding bandwidth. A lot of us talk about goals and dreams and the next thing we want to do in our lives and in our careers, but we rarely talk about the space those things require. Now, before I go deeper, I want to clear something up. When I talk about harmonizing life and ambition, I'm not talking about work-life balance. Work-life balance sounds nice, but it suggests that everything is supposed to sit perfectly at this 50-50 split. Half for your work, half for your life, and that is just not real. Life doesn't show up in even slices. Some seasons, work might take up 70% of your time and energy, and that's okay, as long as you're being intentional with the other 30%. That's what harmony is all about. It's not about equal, it's about alignment. And that brings us to capacity and bandwidth. You might be asking what the difference is between the two. So I am going to use this episode to define how I see both those things. And because they are quite different, I want to make sure that you get that grounding before I go on with the rest of this podcast season, because we're going to talk about bandwidth a lot. So, capacity. Capacity is about what you can realistically hold, mentally, emotionally, creatively, physically. It's the amount of space you have to give to something without overextending or breaking yourself in the process. And bandwidth. Bandwidth is what happens when you take an honest inventory of that capacity. Bandwidth is what I like to call the decision-making part. It's the discernment that says, yes, I can take this on, or no, not right now. Being active in your bandwidth management is a form of stewardship. So let's talk about how I had to put that into practice, even for this podcast season. When I first started planning season 3 of this podcast, I wanted it to be bigger. Video episodes on YouTube, a more polished format, and maybe even a few guests to interview. But when I really looked at my life and my schedules, my priorities, and my energy, I realized I do not have the capacity for that right now. Not because I don't care, and not because this podcast is not important, but because I'm intentionally making space for other things that I've been putting off, and I need to focus on that this season. And those things require different kinds of capacity. And not to mention, I'm a whole entrepreneur these days, leading my strategic advisory and consultancy, Champion Strategies. I have clients to support and the foundations of a business that I need to put equal attention to. So instead of forcing an ideal version of the show, I decided to honor the format that already works best for me and for this season of my life. It's audio only, simple production, quick, intentional episodes that get to the point, because honestly, that's how I actually like to listen to podcasts myself. And I imagine many of you do too. I have to imagine you are movers and shakers and ambitious people who are also trying to make sense of your own bandwidth management. We all know that there's no shortage of content out there, but there is a shortage of capacity. Here's another thing about capacity. Creating capacity is not about doing less. It's about doing what you can with care, clarity, and consistency. So sometimes that means simplifying. Sometimes it means pausing. And sometimes it means saying, this version is enough for now, like this podcast. That is not a failure, and that is not moving in laziness. That is wisdom. Because when you stop chasing perfection and start protecting capacity, you make room for sustainability and for joy. Now, we talked capacity. Let's talk about bandwidth. Let's think about bandwidth this way. If your career or your business takes up 70% of your bandwidth, then how are you making use of the other 30%? That space might be for rest. It might be creative exploration. It might be investing in relationships, health, or learning a new hobby. Some people call this optimization. I just call it harmony. Harmony happens when your energy has a rhythm, not a rigid rule. Optimization can sometimes feel a bit too rigid for me. Harmony for me is about using the open spaces of your life intentionally instead of trying to fill them out of any guilt or comparison. So maybe for you, creating bandwidth means saying no to an opportunity that looks good on paper but doesn't fit your schedule right now. Or maybe it means simplifying a project so you can actually finish it in real time. Or maybe it's something as simple as deciding that good is good enough because the version you can actually sustain is always better than the version that's going to burn you out. That's what I mean when I say I am harmonizing my ambition in this time. It's not about splitting life into neat halves. It's about knowing my rhythm and giving myself permission to move within it without any guilt, without any pressure, and without any perfection, because perfection is not real. So if you've been feeling stretched or frustrated that you can't do everything right now, maybe you don't need to do more. Maybe you just need to create space for what actually fits. And when you do, you will find that your capacity will expand, not by forcing it, but by flow. Thank you for listening. And if this episode resonated, maybe take a few minutes today to think about your own bandwidth, where you could create a little bit more space for yourself, your creativity, and your peace. If you like this episode, download, share with a friend who needs to hear this, who needs to learn about capacity and bandwidth, and have them join us on this journey of harmonizing our life and ambition. I will see you next time on Hey, it's Arlesha. Stay harmonized.